I'm recording. This is Tristan Roberts, recording a special conversation with my friend Dan Ackerstein of Santa Cruz. And Dan, how would you introduce yourself?
My name is Dan Ackerstein. I am a sustainability consultant based in Santa Cruz, California. For the last 25 years, I have specialized in working with businesses and institutions around sustainability challenges, primarily focused on the way they operate their buildings and the way that they handle sustainability issues that directly affect their employees and staff.
To put that in real terms, you were there at the outset of Lead for Existing Buildings, back when it was this idea of, maybe we should care and measure the performance of existing buildings and not just put all this design focus that Lead started out with. As far as I know, you were the reviewer for 35 of the first 45 certified projects. Is that right?
That's correct. I was very much there at the beginning of the existing buildings rating system as a tool. I was not at the table for the idea. That was bigger brains and wiser folks than me. But I was there when people started asking the questions about, well, how would we really do this? And what would it look like? And how would we tackle issues like energy if we're not modeling energy consumption? How would we think about transportation if we're not thinking about bike racks and design elements? And yeah, the pilot period for Lead for Existing Buildings began almost before there was a rating system. The first editions of the rating system were really just marked up versions of the Lead for New Construction rating system. And we were winging it from the jump there. And I did in fact review about 35 of the first projects. They used to come in a series of cardboard boxes. So National Geographic would send us 6 cardboard boxes full of binders, and I would crack open tab number 1A for sustainable sites. And it was literally a paperwork challenge on both ends of it. I think that from the very beginning, I thought it was a fantastic idea with enormous practical and technical challenges. And I'm quite proud of the job that we did in navigating those challenges.
What were some of the key choices you think were made early on that have held their own over the years?
That's a fantastic question. The biggest thing for us, and I don't know that this was a choice so much as a sort of slow motion realization, was at every moment, every interval, having to ask ourselves, is this the way that facility operators actually do things? And whenever the answer was no, we had to ask ourselves if it mattered enough to ask them to do things in a very different way. Because Lead came from the design and construction world, we had a very clear mental model for how Lead should interact with that world. But the operations world was, in that moment, much less sophisticated about sustainability. There was not nearly the drive internally for green as an idea. And we had a lot more sort of established conventional practices that we had to wedge aspects of the rating system into. Some of the things that I think we did a great job of holding on to, I think it was really important that at the outset we decided that Lead and Lead for Existing Buildings in particular was about performance and not improvement. That is a struggle for any sort of rating system, any sort of tool. Do you want to reward people for getting better, or do you want to reward them for being good? And I don't know that it's not so much that there was a right or a wrong answer. I think it was great that we had an answer and we stuck with it. And we stayed consistent with that answer and believed in it. And everything we did that followed was born of that commitment. I also think it's really fantastic that Lead for Existing Buildings was built with a fundamental principle, which is a consultant is useful, but shouldn't be necessary. In a design and construction project, you are the ultimate operators of the building are always going to hire help. But in building operations, there shouldn't be a necessity for a sustainability consultant to come and tell you how to operate your building and operate your building for you. In a perfect world, every facility operator is thinking about sustainability just the way they're thinking about budgets, just the way they're thinking about occupant complaints. It's fully integrated. So if we create a situation where a sustainability consultant is sort of a prerequisite to success, then I think we're doing a disservice to the long-term viability of the idea. Whenever we ran into questions about the technical rigor of an aspect of LEED, we really tried to ask ourselves, okay, at what point is technical perfection coming at the expense of facility operators' ability to use these metrics, to run these numbers, to do these analyses themselves? And I'm really proud that we held on to that principle for a really long time.
Now, you've been a sustainability consultant probably more than you've been a lead reviewer over the years. So you act in the way that, on the one hand, maybe shouldn't exist. So this should be integrated. How do you feel, like, where in your body do you feel that tension between, I want to come in and lead the way really higher, but versus this is truly going to reach all buildings and reach its potential when it's integrated in normal practice?
We've always, one of our sort of guiding ideas and something that I have told my clients at the beginning of almost every project is that I don't want to be a permanent part of what you're doing. I'm not looking to be working with you for the next 10 years. If I do my job well, I'll work with you for the next 18 months, for the next 2.5 years at the most. And then you will feel like you have the tools to go on and do exactly what you need. You will keep my number and you will call me every once in a while when something weird comes up and you think, this is a funny challenge. I wonder what Dan would say about it. And we'll have that talk and we'll be excited that we are colleagues thinking about sustainable operations. The way I've seen the role of a sustainability consultant is to go about making converts. I need to be out there looking for folks who have not yet received the good word and delivering it to them and allowing them to go on and develop their own set of disciples. It's too big a problem for me to be a permanent part of anyone's solution. I just got to drop in and share a little wisdom and keep it moving.
So I feel like that's a great segue to today, the present moment. And from previous conversations, I think what I've gleaned is I know you've been doing a lot of work at Google over the years, and you had what you described as some pretty exciting projects there. And then recently those projects have been cut. So can you kind of flesh out that story if I got it right or wrong?
I've been working with Google for about 10 years. And that relationship started out, as many of my consulting relationships do, with me providing sort of an educational role. I was asked to come in and talk to their sustainability team, the real estate and workplace services team, about sustainable operations, about the LEED rating system, and how LEED and the USGBC think about building operations. At first, it was sort of one direction, me telling them that this is the way that we think about these problems. This is the way that the metrics we use is the tools we use. And over time, that relationship expanded to let's do a couple of projects. Let's work on some interesting building challenges. Let's work on some bigger operational challenges. And Google has been an absolutely incredible partner. I mean, incredible partner, dealing with really rapid growth, dealing with growth at a global level that challenged everything that sort of was convenient and easy about doing sustainability work here in the United States, dealing with cultural change and cultural influence beyond sort of national or sort of personal cultural differences, but also professional cultural differences. The degree to which Google focuses on the health and well-being of coders and of their engineers, and the degree to which engineers are a very different demographic from a sustainability perspective than many of the folks that I had been thinking about as my sort of audience for sustainability. Google's been incredible. And for many, many years, their appetite for risk was really high. Their appetite for adventure and misadventure was really high. And their appetite for sort of fun and whimsy and experimentation and a willingness to get people's attention in clever ways and to embarrass themselves a little bit was phenomenal. That's very much that's my strike zone right there, is let's do things that may be stupid or silly, but might get us what we need and might actually make sustainability, make it a little bit more fun. The sustainability of existing buildings is not the most thrilling, glamorous topic. So it's when we can make it interesting, when we can do a a waste audit in a public space and allow employees to come up and participate in the waste audit and see what's going on, when we can do projects that are prominent and that ask people to think a little bit differently about sustainability issues. It's super fun. I love the public waste audit example. That's one that I picked up in a conversation with Etsy, and I will happily credit them with the idea, not my idea at all. Waste audits are traditionally conducted in a loading dock on a Saturday, and it's even less glamorous than it sounds. You're just picking through trash and sorting it and holding up disgusting things and asking if anybody knows what this is. And it's very effective in terms of a quantitative measure of your waste stream and your diversion rates. It's very effective for the people doing it to come face to face with the amount of trash that a building produces. And the folks at Etsy, and I apologize for not remembering the name, said, why don't we take that visual and put it right in front of our building occupants and give them a sort of voluntary and opt-in way to engage with this image of, oh yeah, here's 60 bags of garbage piled up, and we're going to split them up into piles, and you can really see what we're doing here at this building. And I will always feel like that's just one of my favorite wrinkles, where I've been doing waste audits for 10 years and had written the reference guide language about it and argued with people for forever about how to do an effective waste audit. And never for a moment did it dawn on me that a waste audit could have a public education component in the process itself. And I love that. At Google, we did some really cool things otherwise, things that I got really excited about. We did a field test for a rodent contraceptive as an alternative to rodenticide. We did a bunch of work trying to use Google mapping technology to identify beaver dams on the landscape as a water replenishment tool. We really experimented. We had a good time with the things that we were trying to do, and we were allowed to be really creative in terms of figuring out what might work and what might catch fire. It's been harder to do that in the past few years. And I think that the appetite for bold sustainability thing, and I don't even want to use the adjective bold. I think the appetite for sort of risky, quirky, there's some sort of adjective that works there for the kind of sustainability thinking that has not even necessarily like a short-term goal. Its best case is a medium term, or its best case is to illustrate an idea in the short term that could then be a medium-term goal. Those things I feel like are less popular, not just at Google, but in general in the corporate environmental world. I think that there's a lot of pessimism about sustainability as an idea. I'm certainly pessimistic about sustainability as an idea. And I think it's cooled a lot of what was formerly, I thought, the most kind of exciting and innovative space in the world economy.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. Tell me about what specifically happened for you? What did you see, to the extent you want to name specifics? Like, what have you seen that made you feel like this is really cooled off? Take me to that conversation when you saw that happen. And part two to that question is, we've been operating in a very voluntary space, right? Where LEED is the voluntary rating system, which gets incentivized and required by statute at times. Certainly many project teams are just tasked, hey, do LEED, with no choice. But we're operating in a largely voluntary space. How do you feel about that approach?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, so to the first part of your question, I'm not good with math. I'm not good at numbers. I'm not good at spreadsheets. And I took an environmental economics class in graduate school. It was brutal. I got a C. But the thing that I remember realizing in that class is that this job of advising folks around sustainability consulting, the job that even then, that's what I wanted to be doing, that job would have no economic value if the cost of resources was adequately reflected in what people pay. If environmental externalities were considered, if water cost what it's worth, quote unquote, then you wouldn't need a sustainability consultant. Everyone would be conserving water because of its expense. If there was a meaningful tax on carbon, you wouldn't need energy efficiency advisors because there would be so much downward pressure on energy use. People would innovate independently. The market has great capacity for those things. And And I think for me, that realization has been helpful in sort of in understanding there's there's a market inefficiency that the industry exists to compensate for. And ultimately, we'd all be better off if that market inefficiency didn't exist. What I think has happened over the last few years, sustainability work was predicated on this idea of forward movement. I think sustainability work has always been predicated on the assumption that we are an unsustainable society, and we are moving towards an end goal where resources will be valued in ways that are in fact sustainable, where the economics of things make sense in terms of perpetuating our society, where the incentives make sense in terms of allowing human civilization to continue to flourish for another 10,000 years. In the last few years, starting with the first Trump administration, but really obviously cementing with the reinstallment here, that's no longer something that I have confidence in. And I think it's no longer something that a lot of people, particularly in the corporate world, have confidence in. I don't think it can be assumed anymore that there is some sort of meaningful price on carbon in our future. I don't think that we can reasonably assume that the incredible sort of marketplace dynamic that we've seen around renewable energy. I mean, this to me is one of the great stories of our generation, is figuring out renewable energy and not just the technology, but figuring out how to create these markets for it and these incentives and these credits and ways to sort of commodify renewable energy, given the very specific, well, we can make some electricity over here, but we can't use it unless it's over there. And what about at night? And what about if the wind's not blowing? And we've figured out it's not perfect. Like, there's all kinds of problems with trading credits and all those things. I'm profoundly aware of that. But those are phenomenal solutions, all of which were predicated on this idea that they are a bridge to this ultimate space where we're talking about 24/7 carbon-free energy. It's all driven by the idea that we can't just keep burning the coal. We can't just keep burning the natural gas. Turns out we can. Turns out we might, in fact, decide to do that exact thing. And it turns out that the bets that a lot of companies made on getting ahead of this eventual carbon-free future may not pay off, or they may not be as quick to pay off as seemed conservative even 5 or 10 years ago. If I'm paying an extra 30% for renewable energy, that's hard to justify to my stockholders. But I can do that if it's because I think that the cost of getting new renewable supply is going to go up in the future, and I've locked up my supply at a lower rate than I'm going to have later. If I'm first to market in creating all of these opportunities.
And we've had coal-based power plants going out of business, being shut down based on their bad economics. The costs of coal and other fossil fuels have become higher than renewables, which is in part a reflection of what I think you or I would agree, I assume, is a more correct pricing, where the pollution, even before we talk about the carbon pollution, the heavy metal pollution and the landscape damage, all the negative effects of coal mining were really treated as free by the market until they got priced in by regulation and other things. And now, in various ways, the Trump administration is taking those prices back out. So what we thought were really fundamental market corrections being made to price things more accurately, putting our hand on the scale of the market here or there, because that's what states do and have been doing for centuries, kind of adjusting the market pricing to what seems better for society in the long run. It seemed never more clear to me than when Trump signaled that the future of fuel is gasoline for cars, which, as far as I know, gasoline is still projected to run out within the next 50 years permanently from the world supply. So we're just committed to burning more of that without any kind of off-ramp or diversification plan. So I want to let you speak, but that's kind of what I'm seeing is the pricing that has been turned on its head in this administration and that we're responding to.
You're exactly right. There are all these trend lines pointing towards more sustainable energy futures, more sustainable resource futures. And Trump's reelection has basically called all of those trend lines into question. The fundamental direction of those trend lines, not necessarily, like the trend lines were always uncertain in terms of when. Nobody knew when are we really going to transition to a post-carbon economy? When is it going to be because we get into nuclear real quick and we're talking about 2050, or is it because we drag it out as long as we can, but still by 2075? At this point, the trend lines all just stop. And you have to ask yourself, okay, am I betting on a horse that's never going to come in? And even if I'm not, can I continue putting money on that horse? Like maybe that horse comes in. I've already got a lot of money on it. Maybe it's hard for me to justify putting more money on that horse until I see it come around the bend here. From my perspective, that's what's happening in corporate America right now. And it's not just carbon, although carbon is obviously the most important and the most sort of visible. But almost every aspect of what I think of as corporate sustainability, there is a reconsideration of the inevitability of these things and a reconsideration of corporations' obligation to all of their stakeholders to be a proactive provider of those things. And frankly, that ties really well with your question about the voluntary aspects. One of the things that is great about LEAD is that it's completely voluntary. And that's another principle that I have defended with great enthusiasm. We'll continue to defend. It's the right thing for LEAD to be a voluntary program. When I was in graduate school, when I was thinking about business and the environment as a student, I loved this idea that the market held these secret sort of powers and energies that we could unleash to move towards sustainability. We as a country were coming off 30 years of very successful environmental regulation, not just Clean Air Act, Clean Water Act stuff, but a lot of the really smart regulation that had been done about acid rain and the ozone layer. Like these were developments in terms of the intellectual framework for successful regulation at national, global levels, like brilliant stuff. And I think that those successes created a moment where we thought sustainability is an inevitable outcome. We are super smart in unleashing the market to deliver positive environmental outcomes. Let's combine those things in a way that is not adversarial with business, right? So this was the big pushback of the 80s, was that government is in the way, regulators are in the way, regulations are keeping companies from being as successful as they want to be. Let's trim on that. And people in my cohort really heard that and said, yeah, maybe regulation isn't the only way to generate meaningful change. And I certainly really bought into the idea of empowering the consumer to express their sustainability priorities in their commercial lives, in their transactional lives, their financial lives. I wanted consumers who cared about the environment to buy toilet paper made with recycled content. I wanted them to have an opportunity to actualize their priorities in the marketplace. LEAD is very much a product of that. The driving idea being there are a bunch of businesses, a bunch of companies out there who want to rent space. They want to occupy buildings, but they want to occupy buildings that operate sustainably. And if we can just offer them a sustainable alternative to conventional buildings, they will vote with their dollars and purchase sustainability, quote unquote, in a way that will move the market. I think a lot of ways that was successful, particularly a lot of small ways. And now, 30 years later, I also think it may have been sort of a massive con, a massive grift, of which I was an unwitting and very enthusiastic participant. We spent a lot of time telling people that they had the power to save the environment and that they could influence change with their choices, and that if If they could increase the recycling rate in their office, that would be consequential. And if they were willing to turn down thermostats, that would stop global warming. And I sincerely wonder if that was ever true, and if it wasn't a smokescreen to keep a generation of people who otherwise might have been extremely effective in working for more aggressive regulation from doing so.
So the corporate world hired you to do this work and told you essentially through their messaging, they accepted your messaging. We all agreed this is going to make a difference. Now, we don't know if it made a difference. The needle has not moved. And with these programs kind of being cut so easily, we're feeling like, is the mask coming off of this is what they kind of were good with all along? A concrete example of this I'm aware of is we've seen the last few years documentation come out from the plastics industry that as a strategy, the plastics industry has been content to write billions of dollars off every year in recycling promises and recycling messaging and entire infrastructure recycling, billions in investments, all as a sort of as image burnishing write-off. And that's been pretty well documented in plastics. What else have you seen?
Two things I want to clarify. The first is I'm not in any way, shape, or form a victim here of corporations asking me to do something for them. I ran around to companies telling them, hey, this is going to work. We're going to do this together. And until the very end, that's been my message. Hey, we can do this collectively. I'm here because I believe in this philosophy. And an enormous part of me does still believe in it, or at least wants to believe in it. But the other part is, I also think it's really important. There's corporations, and then there's the sort of the industries, right? And you've correctly said, plastics industry, incredible example. Fossil fuels, obviously incredible example. Like some industries, these industries that use enormous amounts of water, increasingly data centers, but also bottling companies, things like that. Shipping. These are industries where I think those industries have been enthusiastic about shifting the burden from regulation to some sort of consumer decision making. I think that most companies like Google, most of my clients weren't consciously thinking, let's shift that burden, or even we want to participate in that. They were thinking, hey, the world is telling us that we have a responsibility here. Our customers are telling us that we have a responsibility here. We should meet that responsibility. Some companies were more sensitive than others to that because they had either because of the demographics of their customers or of their employees. And other companies were less sensitive simply by the nature of those demographics. A ton of what Google does around sustainability is not because they're worried about Dan and Tristan using Google search and wondering what the emissions impacts are. It's because Google employees are a subset of people who care a lot more about sustainability than your quote unquote average American. Googlers really they expect the company to carry out their sustainability values. Over time, of course, those sustainability values of the employees evolve. And I think that what we're seeing right now is a lot of companies saying to themselves, okay, these sustainability values we thought were really a strong part of who our employees are and who our customers are, is maybe less of that than we thought. And maybe there are other things that they're more worried about, and we don't have to invest as much time and energy on sustainability. Maybe that investment goes elsewhere.
Where do you see yourself today? You have options in terms of where Dan Ackerstein spends his time day to day with his projects off your plate right now.
Yeah.
What are you excited about, or what are you curious about? What are you spending I know you're spending time surfing.
I am spending a lot of time surfing. That's accurate. Yeah, that's probably the thing I'm most excited about and have always been most excited about. Well, I don't think I'm alone in this, but I think that I'm struggling to figure out what someone who has dedicated the last 30 years of their life to a project that seems to have failed is supposed to do. The animating force behind my entire career, my first contact with the environmental movement was when I was 15. I wrote a huge story for my school newspaper about environmental issues the island that I lived. And it was like one of these giant stories. It's like nobody writes a story like that. And that was it for me. The environment became the thing. By the time I finished graduate school, it was abundantly clear that climate was the challenge of our time. And since then, if you asked me at any election, at any moment, what is the number one thing that I care about? And if you want to earn my vote, George W. Bush, what will get it? And the answer is climate, meaningful climate legislation. There's no sign of that happening. That's not going to happen. We as a generation, we as a cohort, I think have failed to convince our peers that is not even the most important. We failed to convince them that it matters basically at all. The last election, whatever you thought of the candidates and their relative positions, neither one of them said anything about climate change. It's not on the table anymore. It's not a point of discussion. And I'm really grappling with what do you do when the game feels like it's over? And I say feels like because I'm experiencing it emotionally as like, oh, this is a feeling. But I genuinely believe that that the gap between the points my team has and the points the other team has is too large to be covered in the time left on the clock. And that's the part that people forget, right? The time left on the clock. It's really easy to say, oh, it's never over. We're still going to get them. Unfortunately, this problem is time bounded. And even if it's difficult for our minds to conceive of that time bound and this invisible sort of deadline, like it's almost upon us. And the time that it would take, even if we somehow inaugurated a dream administration tomorrow, Sanders AOC administration tomorrow, like it's going to be 5 years, 10 years before meaningful legislation was implemented. Like, and that's what I'm struggling with. I don't know what to do, frankly, Tristan. I don't know what the hell to do with myself at this point.
We're talking about the time on the clock, referring to things like sea rise, just irreversible melting of ice caps, major storms, all these disruptive things that...
Absolutely. Changes in global currents and methane release, like extinctions, ocean acidification.
Yeah.
You can't just wind those back.
Soil depletion, a couple that I care about a lot, soil depletion, nitrogen, eutrophication. Some of these things that are scientists warn us, soil depletion, for example, is kind of taking place and it's a slow-moving situation where we're offsetting the loss in soil fertility with fertilizers.
Right.
At some point, these systems are going to flip and our yields are just going to go through the floor and we could have famine based on our current fragility in our economic, food, energy systems. These are the kinds of things you and I lose sleep over, and feels like it's just going to happen. We're going to hit some of these walls.
It's funny because I have this I have a couple of really close friends in the field, people that I've known since before any of us worked in the field. And we often have the sort of like, okay, it's 12:30 in the morning. All our kids are asleep and we're hanging around the kitchen talking. And you get into that heavy sort of existential, like, what's the future we're leaving for our children? And I'm usually the guy who says, when I was growing up, I practiced sleeping on the floor without a pillow because I was so sure that after the nuclear holocaust, there would be no pillows. And I wanted to be ready. And like in my youth, it was a foregone conclusion. There's going to be a nuclear war. We have to be ready for it. And somehow, incredibly beyond all sort of imagination, humanity avoided nuclear conflict, or at least has so far. God bless you, Pete Hegseth. That to me was the miracle that allowed me to be optimistic about climate. And I keep going back to that because I want to be optimistic, and I feel this weird sense of like, oh yeah, I'm probably not resigning my kids to like a dystopian hellscape. But the data doesn't suggest that. The data says something really different, And if I'm a science-based person, if I'm a person whose decision-making is driven by data, I don't know how I could come to a conclusion other than, yeah, it's going to be the road warrior out here.
The data I'm seeing, check me on this, is you have world leaders like Trump, Putin, Xi, who are more grabbing resources for our nations to hoard and keep to ourselves and profit from, versus looking for any kind of longer-term conservation of precious non-renewable resources or Can we share resources in a way that is smarter than fighting over them? These kinds of solutions that looked like we could cooperate on if we chose to. The data of today's leadership is saying no to those.
I mean, with a degree of rigor and enthusiasm that defies sort of any ideological understanding that I had of conservatism. I mean, it was always going to be really difficult for the world to regulate carbon, right? That's a genuinely global problem, given the inequities in the global economy. Frankly, it's the greatest challenge humanity has ever faced. Full stop. This is the biggest one. And so I think the odds were always against us that we would nail it. I think that we had a reasonable shot of sort of fumbling our way through something that ultimately became success. But it would have required, over the last X years, the last 20 years, a lean towards globalized collective solutions and a sense of shared risk, shared threat of genuinely all being in a lifeboat, as opposed to this sort of regionalist idea or what you're saying, like, oh, let's get our hands on Venezuela's oil. Let's get our hands on these tangible resources so that we can exist somehow separate from the global climate. Like if these currents shut down in the ocean or change direction in the ocean, like there's not enough oil to matter. There's not enough fertilizer in the world to deal with these levels of crisis. It's just laughable. But if you start from a point of not believing that any of that is possible and that the science is in fact total garbage, it's really easy to feel like, oh yeah, get our hands on Greenland and we are set for the next 40 years. Okay. But there again, like 51% of Americans went into the ballot box and said, I don't even think climate matters. What I think is what matters is the price of eggs. All right, man. I like eggs too. I love me a good egg.
And I can't say, I think we had a hypothesis here about what would work for sustainability. Your career has played out this idea. And the next 30 years, maybe we're going to play a different idea. I can't say that, this is our path. So we're going to see how it is. We'll get more data.
Yeah, we certainly will.
And one thing humans are I keep coming back to, like, humans are very adaptable. And maybe it's not gradual changes that we do really well, but maybe dealing with shocks to the system and then on the fly reinvention is a more applicable skill here that our leadership is going to commit us to doing.
Yeah. So then the question, it returns us to the original question that we sort of discussed, which is, what do we do? Okay, there's 4 minutes left on the clock and we're down by 30. We're not coming back in this game. Well, do I go to the bench and just wrap myself in towels and watch the guys who are still on the floor run around for no reason? Do I stay in the game and play hard because that's the principles of being a competitor? Am I just going to give up? I don't know, man. That to me, on a personal level.
Let's go out on the field. What?
I honestly don't know. I think about it every day. One of my colleagues, a colleague from Google, when immediately after the election, said that she was going to kind of hyper localize her environmental work. And at the time I thought, well, that's a really kind of convenient and privileged response, right? Oh, well, I'll just work on the things that affect me and the middle upper class white people around me. Totally true. And also, maybe that's not enough reason to dismiss it. And maybe hyperlocal is where there's the possibility of doing some micro level short-term good. If I follow my sort of scientific conclusions to their end, the ecosystems that I care about are likely to be in complete ruins in 50 years. But between now and then, can I make Scotts Creek north of Santa Cruz a little bit healthier an ecosystem and a happier place for people to go visit and a better place for bugs and insects and the things that I genuinely care about? I don't know. Maybe I can do that. Maybe I can find a couple places to put beavers and they'll build a dam and there'll be a beaver family, and that'll be good for beavers, good for me. There'll be a few more steelhead.
And you can be renewed by that. I've been finding over the last year, as I've been on these roller coasters, I've been really finding a lot of joy and peace and solace and excitement in being out in my garden and just planting things, growing things, going out there with my baby. So he's getting his feet and hands dirty. It's that love of one of the best things we can do for the environment is just be in it and teach our kids to love it by being in it with them. And
it's so true.
I think I can say that for the local efforts is that can spark real joy that becomes maybe the future seed of the next wave of innovation.
I think that's so true. And it's you saying that one of the best things we can do for the environment is to be out in it. Is something that I struggled with a lot early in my career, that it seemed like if I cared about the environment, what I should do was be in Washington, D.C., wearing a suit, walking up and down corridors, like handing out white papers and arguing with people. And that never rang true for me, but I always assumed that's because it was so self-serving that I really didn't want to do that. I wanted to be out in it. But the older I get, the more I understand the degree to which we need to be out in it to stay grounded in a figurative sense, to keep that passion going. We have to keep rediscovering new incrediblenesses about the world. We have to keep finding a salamander we've never seen before, or watching our kid discover coyote tracks in the snow. Like, those are the things where you really, okay, now I'm ready to go back and fight with people for another 6 months about some micro detail of the content of carpet fiber. I wish I had heard you say those words years ago, and I might not have been quite as conflicted about all the time that I spent outdoors, but I did spend a lot of time outdoors. So
you're good there. Last couple minutes, I want to attempt to segue back to LEED, that still being a key part of your business, not maybe your day to day because you have staff, but core to your business, core to a lot of people's work. We're out with LEED V5. Any observations, prognostications on the future of LEED, and what's the case to do it? What's the case to be excited about it? What are you seeing in V5 that you're intrigued by?
LEED is less and less of our business, and that's not because I think that says less about LEED than it does about sort of the migration of our sort of areas of expertise and interest, frankly. I think that because we're a tiny little shop, we've been able to really indulge, each of us has been able to indulge in the things that we are most passionate about. And because LEED is sort of, LEED by design is broad and relatively shallow, that for me and my staff, the fun is in picking out one or two things and then going super deep. I think that LEED has a valuable place in the marketplace. I think it continues to be super important for design and construction. I think that the intellectual framework behind LEED for existing buildings is sound. And I think I have always been an advocate for an argument that my colleague Jenny Carney made to me many years ago, which is we have to reach, LEED is designed to reach the top 25% of buildings and to verify the performance of the top 25% of buildings. And we've got to figure out a way to reach the bottom 25%, or at least the bottom 50%. And that to me is the great challenge that I don't think USGBC has ever taken that specific challenge on and said, the future of the existing building space is here. It's the meat of the bell curve, or it's the bottom half of the bell curve. We've given an enormous amount of time and attention to the top quartile, and they have been successful in pulling the whole curve along. But again, we're in a time-bounded universe, and it can't move fast enough. And I would love to see LEED, be it V5, V6, V100, I'd love to see LEED really grapple with the bottom half of the existing buildings market. To me, that's where the action is. It's not where the money is. It's not where the glamour is, but it's where the carbon is, it's where the waste is, it's where the water consumption is.
It's
And
where
that's
the more vulnerable people are,
absolutely,
by and large,
absolutely,
who we need, arguably the market doesn't do enough for anyway. So for the social good of our whole, it would be good to incent investment there.
absolutely. Yep. That's the place for the sort of the equitable part of sustainability to manifest is what about these buildings that don't have the money to put solar panels all over the roof?
Kind of bringing it back to, like, let's get really nitty gritty. I think one of my favorite topics is cooperation and knowledge transfer among different teams in different places. We tend to have sustainability people doing their thing by them solo, one person out of 100 in a firm, directing traffic. I've always been passionate about getting communities together to share knowledge, share information. What's your thoughts on that approach? What's your advice for me in the existing building space right now and trying to create more forward movement through knowledge sharing?
Shit, I don't know. Like, I honestly don't know. I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be a downer, but I feel like we've shared a lot of really good knowledge. It's all there. It's all out there. And it's been presented in a million different ways and offered up in every different platform. And so what I feel like I'm doing in my head right now is I'm looking down all of these, like this corridor, and I'm peeking into every doorway to remind myself, like, did I check that closet? Did I check that closet? And one of the closets that I don't necessarily feel like that I at least have thoroughly checked is one that is sort of getting people, goes back to the Etsy thing. It's helping people confront, and I have a positive sort of confrontation with the ecosystem and with impacts on the ecosystem and what is normal and what is not, and what can be changed and what can't be changed. I think that we as humans are super conditioned to assume that the way things are is the way they've always been. And often it requires someone saying that it didn't always look like this, or it didn't have to look like this. And there's like that these things have been changed and can be changed again. And that we make collective decisions about them. That to me, and also frankly, to understand the boundaries of what changes we can and can't do. One of the things I've gotten involved in here locally as part of my work and thinking is the San Lorenzo River runs right through the center of Santa Cruz. Huge levees built up on both sides. Very effective flood control. Obviously, completely eliminated the riparian habitat that downtown Santa Cruz is now constructed upon. But we are always in this cycle. The section of the river that runs through town is not open. It's closed. You can't paddle on it. Certainly can't swim in it. You're not supposed to recreate in the water at all. And what that leads to is, of course, a lot of trash, a lot of encampments, a lot of damage to what riparian habitat there is. The water is often, the water quality is poor. There's this sort of tension, even within the environmental community here in Santa Cruz, around, well, should we be trying to restore this to a natural space, or should we be allowing human recreation? And how do we balance those two things? And I've been really fascinated by the idea that I think most people in Santa Cruz can look at that area and think, well, we could restore it to a natural space without really understanding that that's not hydrologically possible, right? That's not what rivers look like. They don't have 30-foot walls of soil on either side. But there's sort of no acknowledgement that was a human decision that has effects, and that it's created all these cascading downstream effects, literally at the river mouth, where you've got the beach washes away, it comes back, the outlet moves up and down the beach. The city's constantly having to manage the flow of water and breach the levee and things like it's wild. But there's not a starting point of, oh, this is all stuff that we did. This is all stuff that we're doing, and we don't have to. And looking at it at a local lens, I have been much more I've felt like what's been helpful to me is connecting the today's reality with the decisions that were made, and connecting that to the idea that the decisions we make today actually lead to very different realities down the road.
I mean, we'd have to take away the city of Santa Cruz to have a natural river there. So is it so unimaginable? It's like, okay, we're not going to think about that. That's too big. So we're going to put some boulders in the stream, naturalize the channel a little bit, and say we did something.
Right.
It's hard to keep in mind the whole scope because it's so easy to push that away. But what are the choices we're making today that would be a lot easier to make today when we're not baked into all this infrastructure?
It's funny because I think that I struggle to navigate that question because I'm conditioned to talk about individual decisions and even community level decisions. Okay, the city of Santa Cruz should insist on purchasing only from carbon neutral suppliers, that kind of thing. Is the city of Santa Cruz really that different than an individual purchase? Like these things, regulation is the problem. And there's no social appetite for further regulation, And so I think I feel a little bit like all you can do is keep pointing at problems and saying, yeah, we can solve this. We're choosing not to.
Yeah. And maybe that's just what I think where I'm trying to steer away from that. Okay, we just can't stay in this place. But
I know
maybe that's just the medicine of this place is, okay, there are some things that we know are problems. I had a conversation with my son the other day where I said, okay, here's how I understand our fossil fuel situation in this world is that it's finite. And we, every now and then we do things to get more out of that resource, such as fracking, but it's still finite. And those things, new things we do tend to drive up both financial costs and environmental and social costs of those goods. So we're going to see increasing price, increasing impact over the future. Sorry, I can't tell you more about what it's going to look like over the next 100 years as you live your life, and
right.
That we can't avoid pain.
I think that's exactly right. That's where we are. You have to navigate it. You have to insulate yourself from those realities as best you are able. And I think your expectation for things to change, I guess maybe that's part of what I'm interested in is this idea that we have taken on this burden of expectation that we're going to change things by making individual decisions that change things. And I feel like that expectation can shift back the other direction again. That it start for us to it may be time to start expecting this idea of government that we create to carry more responsibility, and us as members to hold it to that standard. It's not a particularly well thought out notion on my part. Like I'm not doing any brilliant political thinking here. It's just not Hume or Descartes or something, but it's the locus of my reaction right now is just this trying to figure out how did we get here and what made us think this would work?
Well, we're going to keep talking about this and keep checking in.
I love talking about it. I like talking about it it's like masticating the problem, right? Like we're chewing on it, we're grinding away at it. And it takes a lot of molar work to get this, like to even begin to digest it. But it's like being outdoors. The act of the work is what's good, and it strengthens the jaws and builds the enamel on your teeth. I love it.
Yeah. And I think maybe we find out what things we want to chew on, what things we're going to, I think an upside of this current situation is things that we care less about, we're going to let go of, and we're going to find we have an opportunity to get to a deeper core of what we collectively care about.
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. It's a forcing function that way, right? Like, okay, really, really distill down the things that matter and put the rest aside.
Dan, is there any final words, ideas, requests you want to leave us with?
I think the request I would make is that I would love to hear the case for optimism. I've been talking a lot about sort of this sense of my career being a failure and our generation not meeting this challenge. And I don't want you or anyone else to think that I have sort of embraced that conclusion or even feel at peace with it. I think a lot of the time when I'm articulating it, it's because I really want somebody I respect to tell me I'm wrong and to convince me otherwise. So if you come up with, like, if you can convince me, or if the people you meet in your travels and conversations, if you can find someone who can talk me out of it, boy, I'd just be as grateful as I could be. This is not the headspace I want to be in. I want to believe that there's still hope and possibility, despite what my lying eyes tell me.
Well, Dan, thank you for sharing your time today with myself and our audience. And I want to invite people to find you at ackersteinsustainability.com. Find you out on the waves, out on the Pacific Ocean.
Yeah, West side Santa Cruz. You'll locate me. Right points.
And yeah, best wishes for 2026. And let's stay in touch.
Awesome. Thanks, man. Thank you so much for inviting me to come on and masticate so publicly. It was really fun to talk with you and to just be able to contemplate these ideas. It means a lot.